Greetings and welcome back to Robocraft and to the I Come in Peace. Now, I've had quite a few requests in the comments to show exactly how I built the I Come in Peace, so this episode is likely going to be fairly design heavy. Just an FYI for those who prefer the battle-centric episodes. Now, before we get into how I built the I Come in Peace, well, actually, what I'll be doing in this episode, I'll be tearing this down completely, then we'll be rebuilding this. So it might end up just slightly different from this. Every time I rebuild a robot, I tend to make small improvements on it. But before we actually get to the rebuilding part, or even the tearing down part, let's just remind ourselves how the I Come in Peace handles. Now, I'll just jump into a quick practice match just to show it off a little bit, and so I can properly take note of its characteristics. It flies fairly steady, though there is a slight climb. Very slight. It's almost impossible to perfectly balance a craft. It is possible, but it does take a lot of work. You can throw out the balance of the craft simply by changing the weapons on it, or the position of those weapons underneath, and or wherever on it, really. But I find it's better to have something that mostly works, but all the time, regardless of changes you make, than something that is perfectly balanced, but the moment you change a single thing, you have to spend just as much time making it perfectly balanced once again. So this very, very, very slow climb is quite manageable. If you go straight along enough, eventually you will end up climbing like that, but it takes a very long time for that to happen, and long before then you can easily adjust it. So one of the primary characteristics of the I Come in Peace is it's fairly stable. It also has an extremely large platform underneath for me to place plasmas on, because the I Come in Peace is a plasma bomber first and foremost. You could reconfigure it to be a dogfighter, but honestly I don't think it would work very well as a dogfighter. The characteristics of its wings, not specifically the aerofoils, but the sort of block shaped arrow that is its wings, is typical more for a bomber. It's got a very large surface area, which allows me to place quite a lot of weapons on the underside. For a dogfighter, you probably want very long but narrow wings, so that you could place lots of guns on it, but you wouldn't be as much of a target. Because you'd be placing guns on both the top and the bottom, you don't need as much surface area to get the same amount of guns, and you can really use that to your advantage when building a dogfighter. Now, you'll also notice that most of the thrust, or the more powerful thrusters, are at the top, and that is to do with the balancing. I found that the I Come in Peace climbed quite aggressively, so what I did is I placed more thrust on top, so it's kind of pushing the top down a little bit, and that helps a bit with the balancing. But that's enough of flying around, not doing very much. It is time now for us to tear the I Come in Peace apart. Oh, I'm so sorry about this. I genuinely am. Now, I've had a lot of people ask for help with building small, low-tier robots. This is not going to really help that, because I don't think the I Come in Peace would be particularly viable in the low tiers. And I'm sorry about all of the deleting block spam. There's an awful lot of blocks in the I Come in Peace, as you can see. In fact, if you were paying attention as I was pulling it apart, you probably already know how to build it. Now, there we go. We're back almost to square one. I will leave one block. In fact, I will build it out just so it's centered in here. Oh, no, it's the wrong type of block. Damn it. In fact, I am actually going to build it up a little bit, because one of the things I would often notice is that when playing with the I Come in Peace, it would quite often crash land on the floor before I could really get enough thrust to gain lift and get up in the air. So, from what I understand, now this could be completely just made up, but from what I've observed, I believe that the height off the ground you build your robot in the mothership relates directly to how high off the ground your robot starts in the battle. There could be an upper limit, or there could be no correlation between the two at all. I could just be making it up, but I'll run under that assumption now. You always want to start with just a long sort of shaft going straight through, so that you can use that as the spine of your craft. Now, the I Come in Peace also has an arrow-shaped design, and that is fairly important for it as well. So we're going to work on the arrow shape We won't do too much on this because it might change quite a lot as we're building it up. So let's just get that all set up. Now this is going to be the bottom plate for the eye-coming piece. We will also need a little bit of a taper off at the bottom there. This is probably going to end up being a little bit wider actually. But now, once you've got that arrow section, this will end up being the tail. Now the bottom part of the tail probably won't go as far out. You'll actually be tapering it off upwards. But you want another section. Now this will generally be much wider, just right down the middle, but it won't have these arrowy, these wing segments coming off from it. Now, with the eye-coming piece, I made it was the first time I've made a very heavily armored flyer. And I think it does quite well, though bear in mind that this is nowhere near efficient. This is largely for aesthetics, not for actual efficiency. There are numerous times where in tier 6 I take the eye-coming piece out. Now this is largely probably because I've built it out of fairly low tier armor, because that's the only block that I've got enough money to have in large numbers. But there are numerous times where I've taken it out and I've gotten beaten so badly with having done so little damage in the fight that it actually cost me more RP than I had, much less than I actually earned in the fight, to repair it. So with this craft, it has been actually really important to have other craft as standby. Now, I have been using the tier 6 aerofoils. I could sink those in a little bit more. And in fact, I'm quite tempted to, but what I could do instead is push the other aerofoils out a bit. Now, I'm going to put these fairly far forward. And yes, these are not backwards. I actually found that having them backwards, whilst added a bit of stability, tended to pull away from the speed of the craft. And with the eye-coming piece, that was actually really, really important to maintain. So, we want these other wings about out there, I would say. We'll build them 2 out. There we go. Now this is probably all going to change quite a lot once I've actually get out there and test it. But for the time being, this will be a good idea. That'll give me a good idea of how I've set it up. Now the eye-coming piece has 6 wings, if you like, for giving it lift, and then 1 rudder. I'm not even sure if it's called a rudder on a plane, but we'll go with that assumption for now. Now, I think we want to bring these wings at the bottom out a lot more. I would like much more protection for the wings down here. So, let's build this out. Now, you don't need to make it exactly an arrow shape, like I'm doing here. It's a straight line. You could quite happily make it a tapered line. So, for example, you might have every 2 you come out 1 instead of every 1 you come back out 1. But I found that this worked quite well. And we'll bring that out a little bit more. There we go. That'll give us plenty of room at the bottom to add weapons. More than enough room, I imagine. And I need to bring that out a lot more. Actually, it looks like I just stopped there. There we go. Right, there we are. Now, the cockpit is 2 layers up, so it means that if someone's just shooting the bottom of the craft, 1 lucky shot isn't simply going to disconnect my cockpit from the rest of the craft and thus blow the whole thing up. And that is fairly important, honestly, with a flyer, because everyone is going to be shooting at the bottom of your craft. So you want to really think about how you want to protect that. Now, you can make the top wing section the same sort of symmetrical with the bottom one, and personally I prefer that. But again, there's no real reason why you have to. You could make them different in that regard. You could have the top more, and in fact you might get a nice design as long as you curve it properly. Again, the eye-coming piece was built for aesthetics rather than for efficiency. Otherwise it probably wouldn't look anything like this. Right, there we go. So that's come up there. And we'll do the same on this side. Now, this is why this craft needs such high-level aerofoils, because it needs so much lift to get all of these heavy blocks off the ground. If you wanted to build this in a lower tier, you would probably want to minimize the size of these wing sections. I mean, the top wing section isn't strictly necessary. It's not as risky to have that there as it is to have the... you're not at as much risk from, for example, gun beds in the skies, but, you know, the odd dogfighter will come along. And so having this extra plate on the top does help a little bit. Probably nowhere near that much, though. I'll probably trim that off, actually, in retrospect. Yeah, let's pull that back a bit. We don't need it to be out as much as this. And that can create a nice beak for the front of the craft as well. There we go. And there we are. Alright. Now, time to add some parts to the tail. Now, I kind of like having the tail be a little bit stocky. There's a lot of people who just have a single block coming along for the tail, and I've found that generally that means that one lucky shot is just going to disconnect the whole tail section, and then you're going to be in a bit of trouble trying to control your craft. Now, this little section here is built up to allow me to place the rudder and then have thrusters built off it. You don't need as strong an aerofoil for the rudder, I've found, so this would probably be more than enough. Build it in a little bit from the very edge of the tail. I don't want to connect it to that block, because that block is probably going to be one of the first to be blown off. And we will have, again, aerofoil 4s for the very edge. There we go. Right, this gives us our overall design. I'll probably end up adding all the curves and the prism blocks off camera. I'll pause the recording to add those. But this is more or less the design that we'll be working with. Now we just need to add a bit of thrust, and then we can check out how well this can fly. In fact, let's move those down to the next level down. There's no particular reason why you need them that high, and then I'll be able to add the thrusters up there. Now again, I found having the more powerful thrusters at the top allowed the craft to balance a little bit better, and the less powerful thrusters down here, so I'm going to have to pull that back a little bit. There we go. Now this one is unfortunately anchored to the very end section. That isn't great, but thankfully I found that you can... actually, I'll remove these. You can have these prism blocks above them, like that. So it adds a little bit of extra armor for these blocks, but these thrusters are quite often the first things that are shot off. Better armor, of course, would greatly enhance that. There we are. That's a bit of a smoother tail there. Now, along the top, I tended to build up a little bit around the cockpit. This is just a little bit of added protection, really. Not necessary. But I found that, again, the more protection you can give for the area around your cockpit from dogfighters, or as is becoming the trend at the moment, from rail satellites, then the better you can withstand a couple of shots. Ultimately, you are probably going to get taken down by rail satellites, but there's no real getting away from that fact, I'm afraid. However, you can increase your longevity a little bit. Just a tiny, tiny smidgen. Now, let's add... actually, let's add another 2 of these up there. This should, in theory, work. If it doesn't have enough lift, what I have found you can do is you can trim this back a little bit and put an extra aerofoil underneath that one. But let's see how this one flies. It looks ugly as sin, I know. But that's where all the polishing and refining comes in later on. Now, let's see if we can get off the ground. Not quite. That is, we couldn't get off the ground straight away. But as you can see, actually, no, it's stabilized quite nicely there. I thought it was going to climb and then plummet, but no, the I Come in Peace Mark II is doing okay so far. In fact, it's probably more balanced than I've ever made it before. Granted, I haven't added all the bells and whistles like radar receivers, radars themselves, radar jammers. E-War is absolutely essential. I would say you can get away with a lot of without it on a tank, but you absolutely need it in a flyer, in my experience. You do not want to be out there with at least a radar jammer. A radar, perhaps not as necessary, because you will be doing a lot of your engagements by eye. You'll be seeing them in the distance, possibly before your radar does, and you'll be taking shots at them from there, especially with the plasma bomber. But with regards to the radar jammer, I find it's incredibly useful because it can give you those few seconds of the element of surprise, so you can get over your enemy and shoot down, because a lot of them are too busy looking at the tanks that are shooting them than to look up. Some of them will compulsively look up, and those are usually the tanks who, in their spare time, use flyers, like I do. Or rather, in their normal time use flyers, and in their spare time use tanks. But as we can see, the incoming piece so far is quite stable, and that's without any power at all. Gliding nicely. Wow, that is actually a really, really stable. I think we've actually rebuilt it better than before. I'm impressed. Okay, there we go. That's the sign of my impressedness. I blew it up. All right, I am going to pause the recording here, and I shall bring you back once I've added all of the prisms and inners and edge pieces to give this a bit more of an aerodynamic looking shape. It doesn't really matter in terms of the game, but it matters to me. So I will see you shortly. And welcome back. As you can see, I have smoothed the edges, given this craft a bit more of an actual flyer-like look, and I'm pretty happy with the result, honestly. This is completely cosmetic, and these actually have much lower armor value than the rest of the green blocks. But damn it, it looks cool to have like a little window right at the front. It might even throw someone off, thinking that my cockpit was somehow buried in that tiny little space. Obviously, if they thought about it, they would realize that is complete nonsense. But still, it looks like perhaps I'm controlling it from there, instead of back here, which is going to be covered up by many other things. But before we start adding those, I thought, since this is a bit of a tutorial, I might as well show you quickly how I create this edge, just in case someone doesn't already know. Now, the main thing is just to get the inner blocks like this and orientate them along the steps between the square blocks, and then you want the tetras, and you just fill in the tops like that. It creates quite a nice smooth surface, and you can do lots of much more interesting things. This is actually rather bland compared to what I've seen some people do. In fact, I've seen quite a lot of people use these blocks, specifically the prisms actually, to create fans like that down the design. Now, this actually has a use. I'm not sure if these things are a lighter armor. Let me just double check that. Let's see. Armor 136. Armor 136, exactly the same, but this is half the weight. So with a flyer, that's actually going to make a bit of a difference. So why don't we go ahead and do that? Now, this is probably the first time I've done this, actually. I've been meaning to give it a try, though. And I think it creates quite a nice effect. It would look much more striking if I had different coloured armour. For example, if the middle, the part sandwiched between the two outer layers of armour, was a different coloured armour block, and then I had these fans streaking down it, it would create a very striking effect, I think, and it would probably be something you might want to look into. I don't quite have enough prism blocks to do that at the moment, and it's not as noticeable of an effect, but this would actually help, and I believe that's one of the ways that some people produce ablative armor, which is significantly of significant importance when dealing with plasmas, or, well, mostly plasmas, because of the way the plasma damage propagates through the armor. Now, with all of that said and done, let's go ahead and add the actual functional components. So we want a radar right above our head. We also want our radar receiver. Well, actually, that fits in quite nicely. Haha! Didn't even plan that, and it worked well. And then we want 2 radar jammers. Now, damn. My radar jammer is going to cover up my nice little vents, but we'll still go with it like that. There we are. Right, so we have 2 radar jammers. Actually, let me rotate them, because I'm stupid about things like that. And actually, that does look quite nice indeed. Now, I've tweaked the armor just slightly around here. It may be very difficult to notice, but I was playing around with the position of the wings. I didn't quite like the fact that these wings here are very, very vulnerable to attack. So I sunk the wings back, but unfortunately that threw the balance out massively. So we've gone back to having the wings further forward, but that may be an area where I could tweak the design a little bit later. Perhaps make the lower armor plate much broader, or have a much shallower arrow shape on the bottom, so that it covers the top wings a little bit more. But as you can see, a very, very stable flight there. It is climbing ever so slightly. Without the vapor trails, it's a little bit hard to see the climb. The vapor trails are a fantastic tool to working out whether your bot is stable or not, at least with flyers. They actually are really, really handy just for the designing stage. Even if you take them off because you don't want to be more noticeable than necessary in the sky, they can actually make designing it a lot easier. But as we can see, there is a bit of a climb going on. But that will probably be fixed when we add some guns. So that's the next thing we're going to do, because what is a plasma bomber without plasma bombs? Nothing, I say. Well, actually, it's quite a handsome little flying cloud. Perhaps you're going to take this out on the weekends, sort of thing. But no. You wouldn't want to take it to battle. That would be a terrible place to go without guns. Right, we have some tier 6 guns. Now, this is probably one of the bigger things that affects the balance. Actually, I just realized I didn't give a proper shot of all the smoothing I did at the rear there, just so you can see inside as well, and up over these little fins on the back there. But the weapons have some of the most varying weights. Also, there's some of the harder parts to accurately place, I've found. In fact, you know what? To add a little bit of extra support to this part of the wing, yeah, I quite like that idea. Let's build that out just a little bit, just to give a little bit more protection from simply having the tail blown off. But as I was saying, guns tend to have the biggest variance when it comes to weight. And of course, we need the flag. Ah, really? I don't care how important you are. If I can't have the flag, then I'm not going to have the gun. Actually, I can cheat and have the gun pointing another way. But I'm no dirty cheat. I'm going to put the gun properly. But that is something you could do if you were tight on space. You can just reorientate the guns, because the guns, of course, are on a 360-degree turret. They can just turn to face whatever. It really doesn't matter. I'm just being a bit silly with that. And I know it's silly, but I don't care. We want some more guns than this. 2 plasma bombers are not sufficient for the sorts of fights we're going to be getting into. And these ones can go much closer to the Union Jack. Fantastic. If we were to go ahead and extend this out, if we were to make this section a bit more, or just a bit broader even, to offer significant more cover for this. In fact, you could probably cover this one entirely with the bottom armor plating, and then this one about half. Then you'd be able to add more and more and more guns on, obviously. But I actually don't mind just using this many. Though perhaps there's a little spot. I don't know. You could probably engineer a little place to place one of these guns. In fact, you can have one there on the edge, and that might actually help. But no, not for me. You can put guns on the top if you really want to, but understand that every time you shoot at something below you, these guns will do funky things on the top as well, which might give you away, because they'll just be randomly firing off into the sunset, which is a surefire sign that there is a flyer in yonder distance, and might summon the enemy dogfighters to your location. So I tend not to. Although it would make it much easier to fight dogfighters like that, I prefer to just suddenly fly vertical, show my belly, and unleash a full volley of my high-powered plasmas in the hopes that I catch them off guard. That is probably a terrible thing to do, and is more than likely the source of the vast majority of my deaths. But it's what I do. So there we are. Now, the final thing that I'd like to add, again, vapor trails, because they help a lot. But we can place these above the wings. And then we can actually see what kind of balance the I Come in Peace Mark II has. In fact, I need to rename it. In fact, this is Mark III, really. Mark III. Can I? No. Maybe if I take away the exclamation mark. There we are. Mark III. Yes, fantastic. Right, let's take this out for a quick practice then. Now, we are more than likely going to have to play around with the balance quite a lot. Well, typically you would anyway, after adding guns. I'll probably do that off camera, because once we've made sure that this isn't drastically horrible and killing itself, it's still climbing. My lord. The desire to climb is very strong with this one. Very well. I mean, you know, it's better that a plane wants to go up than wants to go down, I suppose. But that will mean I'm going to have to be readjusting my position a fair bit. You can see how much it's climbing there. And as I pointed out, it's incredibly useful to have those vapor trails, if only for testing. I like them anyway because, you know, I'm vain. But as some people have pointed out, this does make you a bit of a target. But damn it, I can draw in the sky with my vapor trails. How can I resist? I can't. That's the simple answer, and that's why I always have them. But that looks good enough to me. I'm probably not going to have to do too much balancing with this one. But now let's find out what tier we are in. I would imagine we'd be in tier 6 because I've pretty much added exactly the same things back onto it. Yes, we are. We are almost in tier 7, in fact, and that's not where I want to be. I want to be in tier 6. There's many, many more things that I want to unlock in tier 6. But I am going to finish off this episode with at least one battle. So I am going to pause the recording here, and I shall bring you back when we have gotten into a fight, because unfortunately, as you can see, it's hard to get a fight as a tier 6 these days. But I shall see you soon. And welcome back. It has taken me a little while to get into this fight. More than a little, honestly. But that is fairly typical of the higher tiers. Well, actually even the mid tiers, which is more or less where we are at the moment. It seems that it's very common to have a spread of classes in the mid-tier fights. And from what I hear, it's even worse in the high-tier fights. You do tend to find it is much easier in the lower tiers, though. 2, 3, sometimes even as high as 4, though as you saw here, there were a lot of 4s in this fight. But I don't think they were particularly happy, or at least I think I caught one person bemoaning their fate. But what can you do? There aren't quite as many players in the mid to high tiers at the moment. It could just be the time of day that I am choosing to play, or it could be indicative of some greater problem. But it looks like we've lost the front of our craft. We've lost our wings there. But, as you can see, with the 6-wing configuration, we're actually still viable, even like this. It's a lot harder to control, mind you, but we can still fly. It's just a bit of a mess. We've still got our vapor trails, though, and that's all that counts. Have we still got a Union Jack? Ah, yes, we have. That is also all that counts. 2 things that are the only things that count. Never mind, let's move on quickly. But let's get back into this fight if we can. We've got our plasmas ready to launch the bombs, and there we go. I'm not sure if we did much damage there. In fact, we got all of our plasmas too. That was just one incredibly lucky rail shot, it seems, that managed to take out. It just seems to have punctured right through the middle of my craft there, and taken out both of those wings at the same time. Very impressive shooting, actually, though I doubt it was intentional. Still, it does deserve an applause, really. Now, I need to come back. In fact, one of the main problems now is that as I've lost those wings, my lift has become rather abysmal. So, trying to fly around... Oh, that's not good. That's not good. Fire! Fire! Haha! Was that taught you your lesson? I don't think so. Maybe that did seem like it hurt, though I've lost one of my tails. Can I climb? I need to show him my belly. And fire! Ah, just missed. But that had hit. If you can hit a flyer with a plasma barrage, it really hurts them, as well you can imagine. But I think, given our sorry state, it would probably be best for us to try and... Oh no, we're not going to make it. We're not going to make it. We're not going to make it. Ah, we're facing the wrong way, aren't we? Yes. Maybe I can just kind of tip it around. Yes, possibly. Forward. Forward to victory. Possibly infamy. Haha! But yes, we were pushing our luck a little bit being out there with most of our craft gone. It was very, very hard to steer. We'd lost one of our main thrusters, one of our side thrusters. We still had both of our radar jams. In fact, we had our entire electronic warfare suite still intact. And that is glorious. We also had all of our guns. But yeah, the loss of the fourth little wing there pretty much meant that the best we could hope for was to die ingloriously in battle. So yes, chilling out on the enemy base was the best we could have hoped for, I feel. Now, let's see what we got from that. Not bad. And the first victory of the day bonus. Wow, that's actually pretty nice. If I had been premium, I would have had 10,000 RP. My lord, but we got 10 tech points. Oh, that's glorious. I'm very happy with that indeed. But there we are. That is how to build and how to kind of fly the I Come in Peace. But as we saw, this is a bit of a vulnerability. So perhaps I should add... Well, actually, no, that's 3 wide. I think the main way we're going to make this more survivable in Tier 6 is, unfortunately, some of these, which are enormously expensive. Still, if you could make a skeleton out of these, for example, like running just the length of the ship and branching off to connect all of the important components, then you would have a much better time in Tier 6. I managed to scrape by, but as I've said before, a lot of the time I'm forced to rely on my lower tier robots to help with the repair costs. Well, I wouldn't say a lot of the time, but there are certain really bad battles that I've been in where I've come out of there earning maybe 1,000 RP and having to spend 2,000 or 3,000 RP on repairs. It's not a good time, but thankfully, the Solenopsis Invicta is always here to help me shoulder the burden. And in the last few moments of this recording, I'll just show you what I've done with her. Yes, look, glorious. I haven't yet covered up the wheels completely, but I'm slowly improving the wheels, and generally speaking, Solenopsis Invicta has a bit of a nicer shape on it. Yeah. So that's a little sneak peek at the Solenopsis Invicta. But yes, I do hope that... oh, that hasn't gone right. There we go. I do hope that this actually helped those of you who wanted to know how to build this. Unfortunately, obviously, I've built it with Tier 6 components, but in regards to building it with lower tier components, it should be quite possible. You just need to swap the large guns for smaller guns and the large thrusters for smaller thrusters, that sort of thing. You may need to shrink down the size a little bit, because obviously a lot of blocks like this do need quite a lot of lift. So you may find that you'll want to trim down the upper layer of armor quite a lot, and maybe even the lower layer, and just go with maybe just a line of lower tier guns. Obviously the lower tier guns take up less room, so that kind of all works out nicely. But again, I do hope that this was helpful, and I hope that you enjoyed the episode. But until next time we meet, do take care.